Before I get started with our Tunisian crochet tutorial, I wanted to give you a little bit of the history of Tunisian crochet. It's also called Afghan crochet, and it uses what is called an Afghan hook. It was believed that the stitch and the process and technique was created by shepherds, but there's no proof of this. It was used in the Victorian times, but it was called by different names. The French finally coined the word Tunisian crochet in 1922, but there was no evidence that was ever tied to Tunisia. Don't know where it came from. The other names that it's been called over the years have been shepherd's knitting, tricot stitch or tricot stitch, railway, and the idiot or fool stitch. The names were well established by the 1930s as the Tunisian crochet. The interest died out in the 1930s, but again it became popular in the 1960s and early 1970s. Then again it died out, and then it became an interest again in the 1980s. Then it died back out, and now there's an interest for it again. Tunisian crochet has been around for a while, but at least for 150 years, but because it really hasn't caught on like knitting or crochet, and it's been known by several different names over the years, it hasn't gotten a stronghold the way knitting and crocheting have. So before we get started, I thought I would show you also a couple of the stitches, what they can look like. The traditional Tunisian crochet is a heavy stitch that you would use for making blankets. If you were going to do a pocketbook and then shrink it, if you were going to make it with wool, this would be a good technique to use. Because Tunisian crochet is almost woven in the solid basic stitch form, and this is called the Afghan stitch, it is thicker. It's almost twice as thick, and here you can see how it looks almost woven. It doesn't look knitted, it doesn't look crocheted, it looks woven. And it is almost twice as thick as your traditional knitting or your crochet. But it doesn't have to look solid like this. It can also look lacy. This is done with a raw silk. And as you can see, this is a very lacy stitch. So there are many different stitches that go along with Tunisian crochet, but because there's so many, there's just no way I could show all of those. So we are going to learn the basic beginning Afghan stitch. The Afghan hook or Tunisian crochet hook can look a couple of different ways. It can look like a straight knitting needle, like the long knitting needles, with a crochet hook on the end of it. Or, and this is the type that I have, it looks like a common crochet hook, but attached at the end is a cable, like what you would have on a set of circular knitting needles. And at the end is a little bead, or a knob of some sort, just to keep the stitches from coming off the end of it. So let's get started with the technique. All right, we are ready to begin. You are going to start with a loop. The beginning parts of Tunisian crochet are just like any other basic beginning for your crochet. You are going to chain stitch the number of stitches on that you need for your project. So in this case, just for the tutorial's sake, I am going to just cast on 20 chains. All right, I have 20 chains in a chain stitch going across here. Now, unlike crochet, where you would just be working with one loop on your needle or two or three at a time, you actually pick up all of these chain stitches all the way across onto your needle, which is why you have the cable here, so that you could pick up as many as you need to. And to do this, all you are going to do is go through the next loop, grab the yarn, and pull it through. Go through the next chain, grab the loop, pull it through. Go through the next chain, grab the loop, and pull it through. And these are just going to be continuing to load up on your needle or your hook. So we're going to continue all the way across until we have all 20. I now have all of the stitches loaded across here. Now again, unlike crochet or knitting where you would turn your work like this and begin again, with Tunisian crochet you never turn your work. You basically are going to load the stitches and then unload the stitches. And how you do this is you are going to take the next loop of yarn, bring it through 2 stitches. Load the yarn, bring it through those 2 stitches. Load the next thing of yarn, the next loop, go through 2 stitches. Load the next, go through 2 stitches. So you are loading and unloading the stitches for each row. Then wrap, go through 2 loops, wrap, go through 2 loops, now if you look closely you can see this forms little like bars right in here, which is kind of where I think it came up with the name. It was at one point called railway or rail tracks or railroad. I think that's why it looks like railroad tracks. Now again, unlike crochet where you would be picking up your stitches along the top, you actually are going to be going into these bars to pick up your next row of loops. So you already have one, you're going to go through the next bar. So you're actually going into the side, not the top. You're going to go through that bar, grab a loop, bring it through and load it onto your needle. Go through the next bar, grab a loop, pull it through. And again, you will load your needle all the way across, or load your hook. You can tell I'm a knitter for the most part. I keep referring to it as a needle. So you're going to load your hook, going through that bar on the side all the way across. If I get this really close, you can see going through the bar, grabbing a loop, bring it through that bar and onto the needle. It's actually a very, very simple technique. I think it's easier, at least this stitch is easier than regular crochet. And here I've once again got all of my stitches, and you do want to make sure you count them so that just like with regular crochet, when you get to the end you want to make sure you don't have too many stitches or too few stitches. So we've now picked up those bars, and I'm going to open this so you can see it. You can see that I've gone through the bars here. You can see the bars right along here, and I pulled up the loops. Now we're going to take these stitches off the same way we did before. You do not turn your work. You're going to loop your yarn around and again go through 2 stitches, grab a loop, go through 2 stitches, grab a loop, go through 2, and you're going to go all the way across. The one thing with this stitch, and you can see it starting to happen a little bit, is it does tend to try to curl. And even on the blue project that I showed you that was done in this stitch, it did curl on me. So when you finish this, you do need to steam or press it or really aggressively block it to get it to lay down, because it does tend to curl just as it would if you were knitting a stockinette stitch. With knitting it's going to curl a little bit. There is your second completed row. So here's your first row, and you can see the difference. Once you've opened and closed a row, it's thicker. You can see it's thick right here. Where this row, because I have not picked up the stitches in the bar here, and these little spots in between, it almost looks like eyelet lace. You can see my fingers behind it, where here you cannot. But as soon as you go through for the next row and go through the bar, pick up the stitch and pull it back through, that is what thickens the row when you bring it back out again. So that is the basics of the Tunisian crochet, and this again is called the blanket stitch or Afghan stitch.